In today's lesson, we're going to be looking at intervals of increase and decrease. But before we get into that, I want to review the things that we talked about last week. So there were 4 really big ideas that we talked about last week in domain, range, positive intervals, and negative intervals. And I want to come in here to the positive and negative intervals real quick to give you a new notation. And remember, notation is just how we write things. So if you remember when we talked about positive and negative, we wanted to know where the y values were positive, over what domain are the y values positive, or over what domain are the y values negative. So if you remember from back in Math 1, when we talked about y values, another notation, again, this is just how we write things. So another notation for y values or outputs was to use f of x. So if you see in any kind of problem where it has f of x and then it has greater than 0, so again, think about what type of values are greater than 0. Positive values are greater than 0. So if you see this notation, f of x is greater than 0, it's referencing where it's positive, okay? And then on the other hand, if you see f of x, again, f of x being the y values, if you see f of x is less than 0, well, what type of values are less than 0? Those are negative values. So if you see this notation, f of x is less than 0, it's saying what are the negative, where is it negative on the graph, okay? All right, so we have this graph here that has quite a bit going on. We're going to go through and just quickly review domain, range, positive, and negative. So remember, domain is your x values, and remember we read from left to right. So we're looking at the furthest left here, and that x value is -5. It is a closed circle right there, so we're going to use bracket -5. Now, when I look at this domain, there's a break right here, okay? So we need to indicate this break, and this break happens between 2 and 3, okay? So the domain runs from -5, but it stops at 2. So we need to indicate that. So it stops at 2, and at 2, so we're talking about this point right here, it's an open circle. So we're going to use a parenthesis. And then it picks back up right here at 3. There is a closed circle there, so we're going to use a bracket. And then it doesn't end. We see this arrow, which means it's going to keep going. So we're going to go to infinity and close that out with a parenthesis. So the domain goes from here to here. Then there's a little break, and it picks back up and keeps going, okay? Okay, all right, so with the range, remember we read range from the bottom to the top. So when we look at the lowest point, which is right here, range is your y value, so we're looking at the -3. It is a closed circle there, so we're going to bracket -3. And then we're going to look at, all right, so -3, and then it keeps going up from there. Now, although this break happens here, there is still that point here. So remember, we're focusing on the y value. So there's stuff going on all through here, and actually keeps going because we've got this arrow right there that says that that's going to keep going. So our range, although it starts at -3, it will not have an end going up, so it's going to keep going. All right, so moving on to positive. So again, we're talking about where the y value is greater than 0. So the y values are greater than 0 up here, which we recognize that there's this piece that's above the x-axis, And then there's also this piece that's above the x-axis. So we have two pieces. So kind of like the domain where we had to split it up here, we're going to have to split this up because there's one piece and two pieces that are above the x-axis. Okay, so when we talk about this first piece, it starts right here. Remember, we had a pretty big conversation last week about that point. So if we were to come in and write the ordered pair for this point, our x-intercept, okay? If we were to write the ordered pair for the x-intercept there, the x value, of course, we see that the x value is -4, but what is the y value at that point? The y value is 0. And we had a big conversation last week that when we're dealing with the y value of 0, it's neither positive or negative. So although we're going to start at -4, 0 is neither positive or negative, so we're going to use a parentheses -4 to not include -4. All right, so again, we're dealing with the positive, so we're trying to describe this piece here, which started at -4, but is going to end right here at 2. But it's an open circle, so we're going to use a parenthesis. So we have described this first piece. Now we need to describe the second piece. The second piece picks up right here at 3. We have an arrow. It's going to keep going. So we're going to pick up at 3. It is a closed circle there. So bracket 3 and infinity, because it keeps going. All right, so coming now, we're looking at negative. So the part of the graph that is below the x-axis, so we have this part right here that's below the x-axis, so we need to describe it. And we start left to right. So the left right here starts at -5, and it's going to end at -4, again with that same conversation from earlier, that the 0 is neither positive or negative. So we're going to start at -5, end at -4. It is closed at -5, so we're going to use a bracket -5. It is a 0 at -4, so that means 0 is not negative, so we're going to use a parenthesis. So that is quickly reviewing everything from last week, the big ideas from last week. I'm going to stop this video here, and in the next one, we're going to move on with this same graph. We're going to move on and look at increasing and decreasing.